What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman, and you're rocking with Tru-ID. All right, so I want to throw this question at you, right? So, do our negative experiences, suffering, and whatnot point to the non-existence of God? Now, I was recently asked that question during a Q&A session following a presentation that I gave in Nebraska. Shout out to my people at Church on Purpose, by the way. Now, in this video I'm about to show, I gave an example of how we might go about engaging those kinds of questions.
Another thing that has been a thing that I've observed just in my own engagement with individuals around this kind of question is that you have individuals that may have experienced some kind of hurt within church, where a pastor or a minister or a deacon or even a parent who was a person who went to church all the time, and or even just that that child who was always drugged to church, and now they're like, I'm sick of that. I'm not going to church. But then also, you have it to kind of a more dire extent where individuals experience like legitimate trauma, and they run into this very common situation that many believers who seriously contemplate their faith deal with, and that's the problem of evil. The problem of evil being how it essentially boiling down to this large question of how can God exist, or how can God be all good and exist, and yet there is the existence of evil, or there is this promulgation of these, just heinous things that people do, and so on and so forth. And so, just kind of speak to how that factors in, how those things factor into people asking these kinds of questions. Maybe not this particular question, but this one and others. But then also, kind of what kind of response would you give to those individuals who that's where they're coming from?
Yeah, that's good, man. That's good. So, I think it's important to remember that human beings are complex. You know what I'm saying? They're complex. Everything isn't an intellectual issue. That's just a fact of the matter. I can't assume, one can never assume that I'm just going to argue into the kingdom of God, or I'm going to have some intellectual 1-2 punch that's gonna, be like that silver bullet that, addresses your that one hit quitter that's gonna get whatever question you have. I get that's just not realistic. People are complex. They're intellectual, they're emotional, they're relational, and any worldview that folks would want to have taken seriously has to be able to account for all the aspects of the human experience. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes when you're dealing with somebody who's got these kind of problem of evil related questions, it's not always time for a response, to be honest with you. I mean, sometimes, I remember, I'm just going to be honest. I remember, I guess it's been about 7 years ago now. My wife and I, we had a miscarriage, you know what I'm saying? And there was this friend of the family who, he was trying to be helpful, you know what I'm saying? And he was just, trying to say something in that awkward moment. He was like, man, one of these days you're going to look back and notice this and just believe this is the best thing that ever could have happened, y'all. And I'm like, and I was thinking in my mind, it took every bit of Holy Ghost in me to not cuss this man out, because that's like the dumbest thing you could possibly say. It's a terrible experience. This is a dumb thing to say. Hopefully he's not watching this, but but it just wasn't the time for that kind of response, man. I'm saying we're relational beings, we're emotional beings. Sometimes it's really okay to just be with people, and it's the biblical. Actually, I would encourage people to check out. I just did a interview with a apologist named Doug Rodgers on this concept of lament. Like, what does it mean to just be with people in their grieving? I'm saying how powerful that can be. So sometimes that's sufficient. With that being said, you're right. I mean, there is this notion that because there's evil in the world, that somehow how could God exist? And I would just kind of use an analogy. Let's say that you hear about this restaurant, right? I've been to some banging restaurants, Big Mamas and all that. Let's say that you go to this, you hear about this restaurant, and this one chef is supposed to be just a beast. Like, whatever he make is just fire. You know what I'm saying? So you're like, man, I'm finna check him out. I'm gonna get out here and see what's up with it. So you go to the restaurant. They make some recommendations. You get the best thing that was recommended to you. You just go for it, right? The food comes out, and it's just nasty. I mean, it's just terrible. It's just there's way too much salt. There's all kind of it's just jacked up, right? And you're like, man, this is terrible. And you look around and you see other people in the restaurant spitting their food out, and you're like, man, who referred me to this place? I mean, everybody is having a bad experience, right? And let's say you leave the restaurant and you go tell your friend that told you to go over there, you're like, man, you was tripping. That thing was nasty, man. I ain't trying to rock with it. So let's say a week later, you find out that the chef really is that good, but unfortunately, there was a waiter, who served the food who believed that, the food needed a little bit extra this, a little bit extra that. And so between the time that the chef prepared it and they got to your table, they had added a little bit of extra this, a little bit extra that, and it made it, just too salty or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, in that kind of analogy, the experience that you had, with that meal isn't really reflective of the skill of the chef. You see what I'm saying? Now, in the analogy, obviously the chef, I would say, is God. The meal is your human experience, and the waiter is sin. The fact of the matter is that, sin has entered the world. We have diverged from the way that we're supposed to live and operate in the world, such that it's caused brokenness. Everybody knows this. Every worldview has to address, brokenness one way or the other. It's not just a Christian thing. I'm saying we all know the world's jacked up, and we've all had these negative experiences, right? But again, so sin has gotten in the way and contaminated, how we experience the world, right? But with that being said, even with all its contamination, it's not fully, even though it still bears some remnants of how God created, there's these extra elements, right, that are not reflective of God, that chef, right? And so that's how I look at the problem of evil, is that, just because you experience some negative things in your life, and just because we understand suffering and brokenness to be a common experience, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's reflective of the goodness of God and who he really is. And so it takes, I think it takes a little bit of kind of teasing our way through that and understanding what the biblical worldview has to say with it more broadly. And shameless plug, I actually have a 3-part series on, why the bad things happen to good people on my YouTube channel and also my podcast that people can check out, where I give a much more detailed response to it. But that's how I at least begin that kind of discussion.
Cool, awesome, thanks, man.
And if you find this video to be helpful, well, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, share it with somebody that might benefit from it, and then also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the whole nine. If you feel so inclined, you might want to consider supporting our ministry, through the Patreon links that I'll put in the description. But y'all know what it is, man. Love God, love people, and take care of things that God blesses you with. Peace.